Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Trump holds Venezuela talks with top aides. So President Trump held talks with his top advisors on Monday to discuss Venezuela amid the major U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean and signs that he is planning to launch attacks on the country. We don't really know the details of these talks that they held. It was Monday evening around 5 o'clock that this happened. Reports say that Marco Rubio obviously was involved, as well as Hegseth and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I kind of wanted to make this the top story because it does seem like things are really heating up when it comes to Venezuela. There's this big scandal with the boat strikes, but it does seem like this push toward war is kind of accelerating. So again, at this point, we don't know exactly what they discussed, but this meeting came after Trump confirmed that he held a phone call with Maduro, which according to a report from the Miami Herald, Trump gave Maduro an ultimatum during the call, telling him that the only way that he could save himself and his family is if they fled the country, and Maduro rejected his terms. There was another report in Reuters about that on Monday that said Trump gave him a week deadline, and that deadline ended on Friday. And then that's why Trump declared that Venezuela's airspace was closed. I put in this picture here of Marco Rubio whispering in Trump's ear. This is from back in October, but I just thought it was an appropriate picture for this story here because Rubio is really the main driver behind all of this. So, some stuff I mentioned in this story we've been covering. I think just the fact that, Maduro is not, he's being very defiant in the face of this U.S. pressure, while also calling for peace with the U.S. and saying that he's willing to work with the U.S. and offering, some sort of deal. But if these reports about the phone call are correct, then apparently the Trump administration is not going to accept any kind of deal with Maduro that doesn't involve him not just leaving power, but leaving the country. And so on the other hand, so again, as I said, Maduro has been calling for peace, making clear he's willing to work diplomatically with the U.S. He's also said that they're going to resist if they're attacked by the U.S. and saying that they're preparing for war. There was another report from Reuters that said his government is preparing a guerrilla-style resistance if the U.S. invades, planning to hand out guns and activate this civilian pro-government militia. And, the argument that we have seen when, it's clear that no Americans actually want this war, and the arguments that we see from the pro-regime change people is, it's going to be great. We're going to get all this oil. They're making it all about the natural resources, making it clear that this isn't really about drugs or drug trafficking. There's clearly different goals, different things in mind here. But this push toward war continues. And the next one here, Trump says that he wouldn't have wanted a second strike on alleged drug boat. So I mentioned this yesterday. I just thought it was important to write a story on this because this is kind of contradicting now what his administration has actually been saying. So President Trump told reporters on Sunday night that he wouldn't have wanted the U.S. military to launch a second missile strike on an alleged drug boat that reportedly occurred in September. The president was answering questions regarding the Washington Post report that said the first U.S. bombing of a vessel in the Caribbean on September 2nd involved a second missile strike to kill the survivors to comply with Hegseth's order to kill everyone on the boat. So Trump said, quote, "I wouldn't have wanted that, a second strike. The first strike was very lethal. It was fine. But Pete said that didn't happen, and I have great confidence in him," end quote. Well, so Trump said this on Sunday night, but then on Monday, the White House confirmed that there was, in fact, a second missile strike. And they said that it was authorized, that it was ordered by Admiral Frank Bradley, who's the commander of U.S. Special Operations Command. And they're saying that he had authorization from Hegseth to conduct this second strike. They have not explicitly confirmed that Hegseth ordered everybody to be killed. But if you look at Hegseth's statement, I mean, he's kind of saying that. He said, this was his response to the initial report. He said, quote, "As we've said from the beginning and in every statement, these highly effective strikes are specifically intended to be lethal kinetic strikes," end quote. And he said that the declared intent is to stop lethal drugs, destroy narco boats, and kill the narco terrorists who are poisoning the American people. That's his words there. And I think I mentioned this yesterday, but he posted an AI-generated image depicting a cover for the children's book, Franklin the Turtle. But his cover says, "Franklin targets narco terrorists," and it shows the turtle firing rockets at boats. I mean, this is the guy that's in charge of the Pentagon that we're dealing with here. Just very flippant about this whole thing, about taking human life. To him, it's all kind of a game, and it's funny. And, you know, I saw Kurt Mills from the American Conservative kind of describe this whole bombing campaign as an own goal. And it really is, because it's created this whole big scandal. And there's serious pressure now, it seems like, from Congress on both sides of the aisle here. Republicans are saying that they're going to investigate this, but both Republicans in the House and Senate are saying they're going to investigate these reports to see if a war crime occurred here. Of course, there's hypocrisy here because, you know, none of these people are upset over the drone wars in the Middle East and Africa, and Trump's recent horrific bombing campaign in Yemen, where they massacred huge numbers of civilians in strikes on clear civilian targets. But this is, you know, there's something's happening here that doesn't seem like it's going to go away. And, you know, you're already catching Hegseth and all these contradictions. He says this is fake news. It's completely fabricated narrative. But then the White House later confirms that, yes, there were 2 strikes that were launched. And this was first reported by Nick Turse at The Intercept, that back on September 10th, that it involved more than one missile strike to kill everybody on board. So this isn't going away. It's clear that this is, you know, this is what happened here. So this could affect, I'm hoping that this, amid this kind of scandal and scrutiny of this bombing campaign, I am really hoping that this slows the push toward a war with Venezuela, or makes them kind of reconsider everything, because they're getting heat for all of this. So hopefully that's one result of all this attention on this one particular bombing of a boat. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. military plans to keep troops in the Caribbean through 2028. So this is an article from Nick Turse and Sam Biddle at The Intercept. This was published, when was this? On November 25th, so last week. So the United States is formulating plans to feed a massive military presence in the Caribbean almost to the end of President Donald Trump's term in office, suggesting the recent influx of American troops to the region will not end anytime soon. As gossip and official leaks about a coming war with Venezuela reign in Washington, Defense Department contracting documents reviewed by the Intercept offer one of the most concrete indications of the Pentagon's plans for operations in the Caribbean Sea over the next 3 years. The contracting documents earmark food supplies for almost every branch of the U.S. military. They detail an effort by the Defense Logistics Agency, or DLA, to source fresh bread and bakery products to Department of Defense customers in the Puerto Rico zone. One spreadsheet outlining supplies for Puerto Rico troops notes tens of thousands of pounds of baked goods are scheduled for delivery from November 15th of this year to November 11th, 2028. And so this is a sign, an indication here that they are planning to continue this major military buildup for years to come here. All right, so the next one here, NATO officer floats preemptive strike on Russia. So some more really crazy rhetoric from NATO officials in Europe. So NATO's top military officer has floated the idea of the Western alliance conducting a preemptive strike on Russia, a comment that drew a sharp rebuke from Moscow. So this is Admiral Giuseppe Cavo Dragoni. He is Italian, if you can't tell. He's the chair of NATO's military committee. And he made the provocative comment in the context of discussing alleged Russian hybrid attacks in Europe. He told the Financial Times that a preemptive strike could be considered a defensive action, but added that it is further away from NATO's normal way of thinking and behavior. He said, quote, being more aggressive compared with the aggressivity of our counterpart could be an option. The issues are legal framework, jurisdictional framework. Who is going to do this? End quote. So it sounds like he is saying, I wish we'd be more, aggressive against Russia, launch a preemptive strike, but, who's going to actually make that happen? So very concerning rhetoric here from, again, the top military officer in NATO. And of course, the Russian Foreign Ministry was not happy about it, and they called Dragoni's comments extremely irresponsible and said that it could be an effort to undermine peace talks around Ukraine. Maria Zakharova, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, said, quote, people who make such statements should be aware of the risks and potential consequences, including for the alliance members themselves, end quote. And she also criticized NATO officials for kind of always hyping up this threat of some sort of Russian attack on Europe. And, we always see European and NATO officials accusing Russia of being involved in whatever, sabotage they claim is happening. There's, it was in the Baltic Sea, there was pipelines or power lines being cut, and they initially accused Russia, but it turned out there was just no evidence of Russian involvement in that at all. But what we do know is happening, what is openly happening, is the U.S. and NATO are supporting Ukrainian drone and missile attacks inside Russia. And so the idea that this would be a preemptive strike, it's just completely ridiculous. But this is how these people talk in Europe, these leaders over there. All right, so the next one here, Witkoff to meet with Putin on Tuesday to discuss Ukraine plan. So the Kremlin said on Monday that a meeting will take place on Tuesday between Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, who is traveling to Moscow to discuss a potential Ukraine peace deal. Witkoff's trip to Moscow comes after U.S. and Ukrainian officials discussed the peace proposal on Sunday in Florida. According to a report from Axios, the meeting focused on where the de facto border with Russia would be under the deal, as Ukraine has been resistant to the idea of ceding territory. The original U.S. proposal that was leaked to the media involved Ukraine ceding what territory it still controls in the eastern Donbass region, which is a key demand of Russia to end the war. President Trump has acknowledged the fact that Russian forces continue to make gains in the Donbass and will likely take over the entire territory if the conflict continues, and it's going to cost a lot more lives. So this is something Trump said last week, quote, eventually that's land that over the next couple of months might be gotten by Russia anyway. So do you want to fight and lose another 50,000 to 60,000 people, or do you want to do something now, end quote. And that's an argument I've been making for a very long time. But we don't know if they came to an agreement on the territory. I doubt it. It doesn't seem like it. This is something Zelensky's going to, I think, resist until the end here, the idea of ceding any territory. So we'll see, how if these talks make any progress. I'm pretty pessimistic now about the chance of this really going anywhere. All right, so the next one here, Trump invites Netanyahu to his fifth White House meeting. So this is just crazy. President Trump invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to visit the White House in the near future during a call on Monday, according to a statement from Netanyahu's office. So if Netanyahu makes the trip, it would mark his fifth White House visit since Trump came into office for his second term less than 1 year ago. Trump has been extremely supportive of the Israeli leader, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court for his role in war crimes in Gaza, and has gone as far as formally requesting a full pardon for Netanyahu in his corruption case, something that Netanyahu asked the Israeli president to do over the weekend. And according to Netanyahu's office, during their call on Monday, Trump and Netanyahu, quote, stressed the importance and obligation of disarming Hamas and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip, and discussed expanding the peace agreements, end quote. There's been no real peace agreements up to this point. As I mentioned here, Israel's continued to violate this Trump-backed ceasefire deal. And so this call between Netanyahu and Trump came after Trump called on Israel to pursue dialogue with Syria after it its recent military action in the country, which included a deadly raid that killed 15 people. So I'll get more into that in the another story here. But the next one, as the Pope prays for peace, the U.S. threatens Israeli war in Lebanon. So this article is from Jason Ditz. So quite the contrast here between Pope Leo the 14th and the U.S. government. So Pope Leo is in Lebanon. As far as I know, he's still there. He might be headed back to the Vatican now. But he's praying for peace. That was a big message for him because he's visiting a war-torn country, and peace was the main message, saying, you all got to work together for peace. And while he was in Lebanon, according to reports from Saudi media, and there's also a similar report in Israeli media, Tom Barrack, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, who they send everywhere, he's in Turkey, he's in Syria, he's in Lebanon, and now he's in Iraq. And he met with Iraq's Prime Minister, al-Sudani. And according to these reports, he said that there would be an imminent Israeli operation in Lebanon and warned that if any of the Iraqi Shiite militias interfered in any way, they would face a harsh Israeli strike on Iraq. So Barrack is saying that, Israel's been, their operations, he's saying there's a new Israeli operation coming in Lebanon. The war has continued. The Israeli attacks have continued. The only thing that's changed since the ceasefire is that Hezbollah hasn't fired back. But there's all these signs that there's a bigger escalation coming, and Barrack is telling Sudani that if the Shiite militias in Iraq, who are allies of Hezbollah, allies of Iran, if they get involved, if they fire any rockets at Israel or the U.S. or U.S. bases over this, then Israel's going to bomb Iraq. And that's a threat delivered by a U.S. ambassador, But again, just kind of the contrast here with Pope Leo's big visit, which has been a very big deal in Lebanon. He's met huge crowds, and he's there praying for peace, and the U.S. is conspiring with Israel to escalate things. It does seem like Israel has laid off the airstrikes while the Pope has been in Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, Trump urges dialogue with Syria as Israel continues raids. So another article here from Jason. So he wrote up Trump's statement here. But anyway, Trump has been very supportive of Ahmed al-Shara, formerly known as Abu Muhammad al-Julani, the former al-Qaeda leader who now rules Syria. And apparently Trump is hoping for a deal between Syria and Israel, and, called on Israel to pursue dialogue with them after this latest Israeli raid ended up with a lot of Syrians being killed, including, as I understand it, many civilians. And this is something that I assume was a topic of the call between Trump and Netanyahu on Monday. So, you always hear him. This is not the only time that, we've seen anger from the Trump administration over Israeli military operations in Syria. Haven't seen any of that anger over Israel continuing to bomb Gaza, kill people there, kill children there, continue to restrict aid. Now, with the U.S. having this monitoring station and everything, they're essentially equal partners in in what's happening in Gaza. The U.S. has always supported it with military aid and intelligence and everything else, but now with the U.S. taking the role as the monitor of the so-called ceasefire, they're just more openly backing Israel's actions there. But when it comes to Syria, Trump wants to rein them in, is hoping for some kind of security deal between Israel and Syria. All right, so the next one here, this is just an absurd story. Stop Anti-Semitism lists Miss Rachel for Anti-Semite of the Year. So Kyle Anzalone wrote this up. So if you're not familiar, there's this group called Stop Anti-Semitism. I don't really know much about them outside of their Twitter account, but they always have like an Anti-Semite of the Year award. And some of the people who are listed for the finalists include Miss Rachel, who, if you have kids, you know who Miss Rachel is. It's just so absurd. They call her an anti-Semite because she is concerned for the children in Gaza, and that is it. That's the only thing she's done, is she's spoken out against the horrific conditions, the killing, the starvation of kids in Gaza. That's it. And, one of the most absurd things I've seen, it was this group, Stop Anti-Semitism. I forget when, maybe last year, a few months ago or something, or earlier this year, they accused her of being funded by Hamas, which if you see Miss Rachel's, numbers on YouTube, she does not need any additional funding. And also, there's a New York Post article kind of, supporting these claims against Miss Rachel. And one of just the most egregious things I've seen in a long time, they showed Miss Rachel a screenshot of a video that she posted on Instagram of her saying, "Oh, let's say a prayer for the children of Gaza." And that was an example of, she's praying for the kids of Gaza. And if you actually watch her original video, she says, "Let's say a prayer for the children of Gaza. Let's say a prayer for the children of Israel." And, they left that part out. So it's just completely absurd. And other finalists for the Anti-Semite of the Year award include Tucker Carlson, who, of course, Randy Fine has called the most dangerous anti-Semite in America, which is also ridiculous. And one of the things, I don't think I watched the whole interview, but I watched a lot of his interview with Nick Fuentes. And one of the things he said was, he spoke out against, he said it was against his religion, against his Christian religion to have hate, for a group of people. But anyway, and then the other notable names on there are Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks. They've been coming under a lot of heat lately for their criticism of Israel. I know Anna has said she's a fan of this show, which is pretty cool. And they recently interviewed had Scott Horton on there, which is very cool. But anyway, it's just absurd. And I mean, if they really think this is a winning strategy here to accuse Miss Rachel of anti-Semitism, again, it's just completely ridiculous. All right, so the next one here, the IDF kills most Hamas fighters trapped in Rafah. So this article is from The Cradle. So the majority of the resistance fighters who were trapped in tunnels under Gaza's southernmost city of Rafah have been killed by the Israeli army, Hebrew media reported on December 1st. So they're saying that the Israeli Southern Command is estimating that most of these Hamas fighters who have been trapped in this area have been killed. They said the other day that they killed 40 over the past week. The estimate was that there was about 150 to 200 of them, and Hamas said that they lost contact with them months ago. And there was talk of the U.S. was pushing for some kind of deal that would involve Israel allowing these Hamas guys to leave the area. They would leave their weapons behind and give them safe passage to the Hamas-controlled side of Gaza. And they wanted to do that, but Israel obviously didn't go for that, and they're continuing military operations in this part of Gaza. And the U.S. is apparently pushing for Rafah to be the first place, as I think we covered last week, to build these housing compounds, these camps, internment camps, essentially, for Palestinians in Gaza. The idea would be to screen people coming from the Hamas-controlled side, and if Israeli intelligence approves them, then they'll be allowed to live there, but they won't be allowed to leave. But this is one of the plans for Gaza, and the U.S. wants that to start in Rafah, which has been just completely destroyed. If you remember back in 2024, this is where Biden said, they're just launching a limited incursion into Rafah. But it's just been completely leveled, and they've taken over the city and the border crossing with Egypt completely. All right, so the next one here, Trump criticizes Somali government while backing it. So President Trump has taken a shot at the government of Somalia as part of his criticism of Somali migrants in the U.S., despite the fact that he has provided the Mogadishu-based federal government of Somalia with more air support than any other U.S. president in history. So this is something Trump said over the weekend about Somali migrants, he was speaking about migrants in general. He said, quote, "The people from different countries that are not friendly to us and countries that are out of control themselves, countries like Somalia that have virtually no government, no military, all they do is go around killing each other. Then they come into our country and tell us how to run our country. We don't want them," end quote. So he says all they do in Somalia is go around killing each other while he's helping them going around and kill each other. So Trump's comments, and he's killing people. I don't even know. I really have no idea of what the number is of how many people the U.S. has killed in this unprecedented number of airstrikes that we've seen. And Trump's comments came after U.S. Africa Command announced its 101st airstrike in Somalia, which, of course, if you watch this show, you're aware that's a completely unprecedented number. more than 10 times the number of airstrikes the U.S. launched in 2024. Almost double of Biden launched 51 during his entire term. So we're almost at double what Biden launched in 4 years in just 1 year. And the year's not even over yet. So Trump says this, and recently he also said, it was a few months ago maybe, that, I forget exactly the wording, but he said something like, no longer do we go around the world, policing the far reaches of the world in places like Kenya and Somalia. And he says that while bombing Somalia like no other U.S. president ever has. And this is a pattern. His first administration, he launched an unprecedented number of airstrikes in Somalia as well. And now he's doing it again. And it seems like he might not even be aware of it. So, what I mentioned here is when he says that Somalia basically has no government, he's not exactly wrong. I mean, the central government in Somalia, you shouldn't even really call it a central government because it controls, a small amount of territory in southern and central Somalia, and other parts, including Somaliland, Puntland, now Jubaland in the south, are essentially de facto independent areas. And then other parts of Somalia, some areas are controlled by certain different clans. Some of them are pro-government, some of them aren't. And then Al-Shabaab also controls territory. And this is a foreign installed government, a government that initially was called like the transitional government that started, I think it started in Kenya, and then they moved it into like a small town in southern Somalia. And then in 2006, Ethiopia invaded and ousted the Islamic Courts Union, and they installed this government. And that's what became the federal government of Somalia. And, without foreign support, it's essentially would be a given that it would collapse. So again, Trump, what Trump's saying is not entirely wrong, that they don't have a government. And, there's governments obviously in different parts of Somalia, but this idea that you look at a map and you see Somalia, it's just not, all controlled by the government. And earlier this year, there was a meeting at the White House. This was reported by the New York Times in April. And essentially the meeting went down something like this. State Department officials said, Al-Shabaab is threatening to take Mogadishu. We should get our people out of there, evacuate the embassy so we don't have another Kabul evacuation like when the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan. And on the other side was Sebastian Gorka and other hawks who said, no, let's double down on propping up this government and increase airstrikes. And they won the day. And I think in the future, we're going to look back on this time, anybody who cares about it, as, like kind of the last years of the war in Afghanistan. When Trump first came into office, he dramatically ramped up airstrikes in Afghanistan, in a huge way. And what did that accomplish? When they pulled out, when the U.S. pulled out, the Taliban walked in. And I think, we'll probably see something similar if the U.S., when the U.S. pulls out of Somalia, no matter how much they bomb the country, in the years before that. All right, so the next one here, National Guard shooter was imprisoned in Afghanistan. So this article's from Dropsite News. And so it's about Ramanullah Lakhanwal, who was arrested for shooting the 2 National Guard members in D.C. and killing at least one of them. He worked for the CIA-backed Zero units in Afghanistan. And this is an interesting report here where they speak to people from the area of Afghanistan that he was from. And they said at one point he was put in jail over killings committed by this CIA-backed force. And during that time, he still continued to receive money from the CIA, and there was never any accountability for the crime, which I believe that they were accused of killing members of the Afghan military. But there was all sorts of, allegations of war crimes and everything that specifically the unit he was in committed. And again, locals here saying that he was put in jail here. So, this is, again, like when it comes to Afghanistan, it's not like he was just a member, involved in the war or a member of the government. He was part of like one of the worst aspects of the U.S. disastrous war in Afghanistan. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Roger D. Harris. Trump commands Venezuela's heavens closed. One from Daniel Larison. Trump is the destroyer of peace. One from Harrison Berger. From DC to California, pro-Israel censorship is getting worse. One from J.D. Hester, when populists unite, the neocon horseshoe closes. And our spotlight from Jose Nino, Trump plan shows that he doesn't understand Russia. So please go check all that out. Lots of other stuff to read on the page. That's it for me for today. Please like, subscribe, comment. All that stuff helps out. Share the show. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Share our articles around. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.